Hopefully this is something that'll be useful for students engaging in this competition that we're running this year. It's about the fourth or fifth year now that we're running this, and we've gotten some great feedback over the years. But I know one of the things that's been useful for students is getting some interaction from guys who will be doing the judging, or just an interpretation of the brief to kind of give you some bit of guidance. So to start with, I'm Dave Barry from Walls to Workstations. I'm here with Simon Dennehy from Perch, and joined online here by Frank O'Connor from Inish. So Simon's with Perch, we're a design company, and his interpretation on it, or his perspective on this, is around the design elements of the proposals that will be coming in. Frank is an expert on the circular economy, which is, I suppose, an overall concept that will be hopefully be involved in everybody's thinking on their design here. So I think I just, maybe to start with, I just remind people that obviously they need to register on Submittable, and your lecturer should have those links to get people on board. And once you do that, you will get an email back giving you some more instructions, including a link for you to make your upload of your submission. There's lots of details in the document there, the competition document, explaining what to do, what format your document should be in, all the rest of it. So if you just follow those, it'll be all good, and then you can upload them via that link on Submittable. The closing date, Friday, October the 18th. So, and if there's any issues or any questions on that, you can get in touch and we'll give guidance. But maybe if we just start the discussion, then maybe if I just start with Simon, and maybe you can give some advice in terms of how students may want to interpret this brief, to kind of stay as close as possible, I suppose, to the criteria for judging, without limiting people.
Yeah. So hi everybody, thanks for agreeing to work on this competition. It's our fourth or fifth year being involved with the competition, and I suppose every year we do is we try to put a new type of spin on it. From our perspective, we're really interested in how you approach it from a user perspective. What are the critical insights that you found when you're doing research and development? I guess our main line of work is looking at applied human movement, and what are the critical starting points from our point of view is, like, we're really interested in the psychological aspect, the ergonomics, how people feel comfortable and cozy in the workspace, and how general interactions between people create new ideas. So rather than looking at pieces of furniture and trying to adapt and modify and get the next revision out, which can generally tend to be quite regurgitative and old, we're looking at really new ways of thinking about furniture design and development. And that leads us to kind of design, I suppose, new and not obvious solutions. And if you look at Grey Fox products, there are always kind of some new aspects to the furniture that you might not have seen before if you were to take a classic armchair and design it. And that's kind of the insight we're looking from this competition, looking at people first and how people interact with each other, how they interact in an office environment with the tools they have, and how they interact as people communicating. What new and novel solutions can you come up with? This year we've selected circular economy as another key influencer in the design phase, and I think that should be really interesting to see how you approach it. Frank, maybe you have some insights into that.
Great, yeah, nice one. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, great. Well, obviously, delighted to get a chance to speak to people and to be part of the competition. Just building on what Simon said there, I mean, I suppose the first thing is just to kind of explain where I'm coming from in a bit more detail. Yeah, so my work over the last 30 years has very much been around the concept of eco-design, being good design, and in the context of a circular economy and in terms of business responsibility. So what I suppose particularly interested in the idea of, if you can design products in such a way that they're moved from a linear to a circular life cycle. So I'm particularly interested in sort of the idea that all materials have a value beyond that initial use. So I'm interested in what kind of materials you can select. If you're selecting materials, they need to be non-toxic. They need to explore avenues such as recoverability, recyclability. But particularly I'm interested in sort of the idea that you've got a set of design strategies. So you're sort of, as a designer, you're going to have a number of design strategies, tools that you apply. And with that, then you also have to look at the business who's going to offer that particular product. So it's not just designing the product itself, it's looking at the service offering around the product, and then it's looking at the business model of the organization who's going to deliver that. And that's key for eco-design and the circular economy. I mean, a lot of times people do some really interesting designs and they make them maybe more recyclable or more repairable, but they don't consider how the product is going to then be offered to the particular user. And I suppose from my perspective and our business perspective, in terms of a niche, what we work on is very much in parallel. You develop the design, and you look at the appropriate strategies. It could be, I want to design a product that can be repaired, can be serviced, can be maintained, can be used beyond a single lifespan, maybe used 2, 3, 4 times. Maybe certain components can be upgraded. Maybe there's a modular element to it. So that's me exploring the design strategies with my business partner, with a client. But around that, in parallel, we're exploring the business model. So what I mean by the business model is, so we design a product like a piece of furniture, which is modular, upgradable, has a lifespan initially 5 years. You take it back at the end of 5 years and you can repair it and resell it. Grand. We've got these design strategies. We're choosing the right materials. Like I said, they need to be non-toxic. We need to be aware of the carbon input going into it. And there's obviously quite a few other criteria. But in parallel, it's very important to understand is that business model. And that comes back into where Simon's work would be very much in terms of understanding the human needs, the user needs, the market trends, etc. But in other words, there's no point designing a piece of furniture to be repairable, multiple life cycle, etc. if the client, if the user isn't interested in that, or if the business model of the company that's offering it obviously isn't appropriate either. So you design a product that's repairable, and in parallel, you put in a business model that says, actually, we're going to offer this to our clients in such a way that we will offer maybe a repairable service as well. Maybe we don't sell the product to them. Maybe we lease it instead. We take it back. We offer maybe a maintenance service around it. So, I think a lot of challenges to do with sort of eco-design over the years and circular economy have been the fact that it's been done in isolation. So, okay, we know 80% of the impact is at the design stage. I've got a design background. I spent 30 years doing this. I would always advocate the role of design is really, really important. But it has to be a collaborative approach. It has to be a collaborative approach across other disciplines as well. And I think that's become more clear over the last few years, that the companies are beginning to understand slowly that it's okay to get the designers to design nice stuff in a repairable, remanufacturable, non-toxic way, but unless the business is working with them in parallel. So you have to really look, okay, you guys, in terms of the brief, you are focusing on designing a particular product, but that product will require a certain service, and that will require a certain business model. And I think that's the key to it, to be thinking that manner. Because what you don't want to have is a really nice product that goes onto the market, but actually no one wants to purchase it, or the business model that goes with it that doesn't work. So it's very much thinking about the life cycle. It's thinking the system around it. It's thinking the value chain. It's thinking about, well, okay, where are we trying to frame this? Like if we want to choose certain materials, then obviously there needs to be a value chain to provide those materials. If we want to, like recycling is not circular economy. A lot of people assume, okay, design a product to be recyclable, then it's actually that's circular. You're really down on the bottom level there. Your bottom, it's low hanging fruit. We want to do more than that. We want to maintain the value. We want to minimize the energy consumption over life cycle. We want to minimize all the emissions. And I suppose in terms of context where circular, again, probably will be aware from probably what the modules you're doing in university at the moment, maybe the interest you have in design, you might be exploring different design models. I mean, you need to be aware that circular design, which is a term being used more and more by designers, is actually a subset of eco-design. So eco-design, so if you think of design for sustainability or sustainable design, you've got social design, you've got eco-design. They're the two key subsets under it. And within those then, under eco-design, you'll have circular design. Because there's a lot of criteria within circularity which won't cover the full life cycle, maybe the energy, the carbon, etc. So really not trying to confuse you or anything at this stage, but saying the design cannot work in isolation. You can come up with a really nice design and it can look beautiful, which it should, and it can be function for the functions, features you need. But to do so in terms of life cycle and circularity, you really need to be aware of how that design, that product is offered into the market, what the service model is, what the business model around that, and then it can really work in harmony, and then you can come up with something that is more sustainable.
I think that's a really neat summary, actually, of the whole thing. That's a nice encapsulation of the idea that people should have in mind while they're working on this, on the project. Maybe, Simon, actually, maybe you can give some sort of idea of what's been successful in the past in terms of people's interpretation of briefs. And we were never very prescriptive about the way this goes. So we've had some weird and wonderful, wide-ranging ideas that have featured in the competition. But maybe if you give some, if there are some kind of broad tips or broad kind of ideas that have been successful in catching the judge's eye, I suppose.
I mean, I think it's like what's worked in the past has often taken the judges by storm. You know, I mean, we were just talking earlier about how almost like a radio channel that a company could use to deploy information throughout a large organization was one of the year's winners, and it really challenged everybody in the judging panel, because we realized that it was something that between us we were probably not going to look to commercialize, but it genuinely was the best idea that year. In other years it's been a kind of a unique soft approach where it took like there was an egg chair that won last year, but it was talking about how nomadic work practices could influence people in the workspace, and we had a kind of advisor that pulled down over the egg chair, and it was just one of those critical insights that balanced very good design aesthetic skills, as well as, you know, touching on really empathetic design and how people would feel when they're in that. There was a really good understanding, and I think this year, I mean, just looking at how we're trying to drive our practice a lot more, we're working on some chair projects at the moment with Orange Box, and we have in the past with LaBufa, and it comes down to, you know, you may see this chair, if it gets commercialized, on the market in 30 years time in dire need of repair, and if you at the front end haven't considered how that chair gets broken down and how the plastic gets removed from the and reused again, I mean, you're thinking not in a 5-year window, but sometimes in a 30-year window, how that product gets onto the marketplace, how it gets returned to the marketplace, how it gets tagged, what responsibility does that company have in the long run, not just the short run, are very influential. So it's not really a specific design we're looking for. I mean, you may completely come left field and suggest something that we haven't thought about before, and I think that's the real exciting thing about this competition, you know.
And I suppose actually another thought on it is that as part of the competition prize, I suppose, is where possible that we can line up placements with Perch, and maybe it was in Grey Fox as well, just so that people can develop their concept. So I suppose it's very much it'd be very useful for people to have something that, to bear in mind that it is ultimately something that would be potentially brought to market, or that there could be, you know, commercial reality, or that, you know, that should be something worth investigating for people, I think, for being involved there.
Yeah, and I think one of the realizations from Grey Fox, it's a new company. There's a few projects on the market already, but we're still very influential. Like we're open to being influenced. So if there's a service design that comes out of that rather than just a product, I think we're open to that idea. So we really are open to curveballs, you know. I mean, if we should sell the furniture in a certain way to clients and pick it up when it's at end of life, or service it in a certain way, I think all those options are open to us at the moment.
Yeah, I think just to come back in there, just to kind of sort of maybe build on a few of those points there by Simon, I suppose just wanted to kind of, I suppose, reiterate, this is not a trend. So circular economy is not a trend. It's something that's here to stay. I mean, it might change, terminology may change in terms of how it's been described, but it's here. It's here because we are in a situation, for example, if you look at furniture, we've got significantly rising material costs globally. We have a lot of materials that we may want to use becoming less available, and we also have a rise significantly if you look at it in terms of waste costs. So you got the rising waste costs, you got the rising material costs, you got the climate change agenda, you got the I suppose a lot of I suppose competition globally, where businesses are beginning to look at things quite differently. So from a designer's perspective, this is something that I suppose really the competition is great that it's there. It's great it's focusing on circularity in this year, because it's something that I believe that all the designers in Ireland should really get instead of a good take on at this stage, and understand that it's not just the nice thing to do, that designers like us or like Simon with his company and stuff, that it's something that we have to look at for every brief. It's not just I want to do a nice eco product today and then tomorrow I'll go back to the way I'm doing business before. I'm sure Simon can verify this, me and my partner Jude, with our work. This is what clients are looking for. This is the direction it's going and stuff. It might be a slow burner in certain industries. And I think furniture is particularly interested for this, because we have a lot of opportunities to start looking at materials in a different way and look at things like durability and longevity. And so I suppose one of the things I wanted to kind of remind people as well is when we go back to sort of deciding on what those design strategies and what the business model to go with it is, you got to also remember that if you're, for example, designing something for repairability, and if that's your business approach, you're designing the product a certain way, you also have to provide, for example, spare parts. I know in the world of 3D printing and stuff, and as manufacturing, of course, we can produce things quite easily. But as a business, you may decide to provide spare parts for a period of time to support that business model. So I think it's just a case of understanding this is part of your design specification, your design brief. It's embedded in it, and when you look at things like how the brief will be assessed, and I think Simon may want to speak some more about this, circularity, responsibility, eco-design, that goes across the criteria, and I think that's important to remember. So
I think from our perspective as furniture dealers, we're finding that more and more that it's driven by clients. So we deal with a lot of the big tech companies and that sort of thing, and they won't tolerate product that doesn't have the right environmental credentials, and not just greenwashing it, but just having thought it right through the process. So it is very much a central idea.
And I think as well as that, what is really interesting at the moment is that we've been trying to look at the projects from a systems design perspective, where it's everything as well as the product. It's the whole system of delivering that product into the end user. So like for something like our float armchairs, which are quite big, what packaging does that come in? I don't think we yet have a final answer for that, because you'll ship it, it's going to be highly protected so that no fabric or steel gets damaged. And then at the end, when you drop it off to the client, you're left with a load of waste that potentially will cost you quite a lot to bring that back and reuse it again. But what's the system that we can apply so that either it goes and becomes useful to somebody else in some other way, or it comes back to us? And what does that mean for the company? Does that mean that we have to have a specific delivery system for the furniture? So it's like, I think when you're talking circular economy, it's that entire system of design that can really help. And I think for you guys, it's about you picking maybe one or two aspects of that and improving on it, rather than trying to do the whole thing in a short period of time. Maybe you just look at packaging for a chair. I mean, if you look at IKEA, how are they leading that field? Are they leading that field? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, when you think about the system of design, you have the product, but you also have the service at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the I suppose the way that this would be scored, or the metrics that are used there, is there any advice to people? I know it's documented obviously in the brief document, and it's broken down there. But if there's any guidance there that we can give people, maybe in terms of the way that's used on the final day. Sorry, unrehearsed question. So
I suppose just to come in there, I suppose on I suppose the sort of accountability and the transparency. Again, this is quite important. Again, I suppose something you're probably coming across, David, more and more in terms of what you were saying there in terms of environment issues and the brief and stuff. But again, it's for everyone to start thinking about more and more about transparency and accountability. And in other words, I suppose if you choose a particular material or a design strategy and you build that into your product, to be kind of mindful of the fact that the implications for that, okay, who's supplying it, where is it coming from, is it a fair supplier, is stuff, what is that value chain like? But also what is the implications as you go down along the life cycle? So it could be great from a design point of view. It might give you great flexibility in terms of how the design you produce, but maybe production issues, maybe transport issues, maybe user issues in terms of VOCs, whatever. And also it could be issues, so what you're trying to do is say, well, actually, I'm not trying to displace the environmental impact further down the life cycle. I'm trying to go, well, actually, over the life cycle, which is why tools like, again, I'm sure we're not expecting people to do a quantifiable life cycle assessment or LCA, but it's good to start thinking about life cycle assessments. We work a lot, myself and Jude, with companies where LCA is a part of their business in terms of design approaches, but they're not necessarily doing full scientific LCAs, but they are going, well, actually, there is simple tools available, and we are beginning to understand where the impact over, if you start choosing this material, is it really recyclable, or what is the impact at each stage? So it's trying to think, well, actually, it's mapping that out, and I suppose and beginning to show an understanding, but also back it up with some insight, like Simon has already said, but also some research as well. Saying, well, actually, and there are some interesting companies. IKEA is interesting. IKEA are interesting. And I think it's worth spending a bit of time looking at IKEA and looking at where they started and where they've been over the last 10, 15 years and where they're going and what they're investing in. I mean, for example, IKEA have invested quite a lot in disassembly, assembly, disassembly. And so what are they doing there? What is that methodologies? Why are they doing it? And if you look at how they're evolving some of the business models as well, there is stuff happening there. And obviously Orange Box, who I've worked with a lot over the years, they are also interesting. Look at why they made the decisions, I mean, things like, why did they choose to go down, for example, cradle to cradle? What does that mean, So I think there are good examples out there. I mean, it's looking at, but also when you do this kind of design work, and I'm sure your lecturers speak about this anyway, but it's good to look at other sectors. And again, from my work, myself and Jude's work, a lot of what we find is that you can learn a lot of interesting insights and lessons from totally different sectors that you can bring into furniture. It might be that they're a different design or a different business model, but there's insights to be gained. So I think it's kind of keeping them sort of a blank sheet of paper, looking out very, very open initially, saying what, with the brief in mind, and then coming back in and stuff, and not ignoring electronic. For example, electronic sector, it's a sector that's much more established in certain aspects of eco-circular design than maybe the furniture sector, particularly in certain elements. So look to those, see what's happened. I mean, I worked in that sector for 30 years. See what's happened over the period of time, and you look at things like, why did, we'll say, office automation, like things like photocopiers, why is there a different business model for those in these situations? Why are they maintained and repaired? Maybe it's a value issue, maybe it's a material issue. So I suppose I'm just sort of reminding to keep it as well, like initially quite broad, but always, like I said, it's to remember, I suppose, if I'm involved in assessing, I'm looking for it embedded in the design process, embedded in your research methodology. I'm not looking for like a nice recyclable logo at the end that's stamped on the final concept. That means nothing to me. And
I think one of the really interesting articles I read recently was about IKEA's pallets, where they realized that they could move to a cardboard pallet.
Oh yeah.
Rather than wood, and I thought it was such an interesting design. You don't think of IKEA in that way, but they're so big and they require so many that moving to cardboard meant that itself was part of the whole value chain for them,
And I suppose even like if you're looking for inspiration, you're not sure what direction you want to go in terms of design stuff, even look at trends like urbanization, customization. Build those trends maybe into your own mindset in the brief. I mean, we're moving towards urban areas, we're moving towards cities, we're moving into smaller spaces. We have different challenges when it comes to furniture and stuff. So, again, combine that with a circularity mindset and eco design mindset, you suddenly come up with lots of interesting possibilities and stuff.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, is that everything? I think that's a pretty good sort of guide for people and some good advice in there. So maybe on that note, I just recap on getting onto submittable. Obviously, all the details are in the brief in terms of what the document needs to look at, how it needs to be presented, and uploaded via the link on submittable. Closing date again Friday, October the 18th. I thank Frank O'Connor from Inish, inish.org, if you want to read any more about what they're doing, some really interesting stuff in the circular economy. Simon Dennehy from Perch, and that's perch.ie to see what what they're doing. Greyfox.design is some of the product reference by Simon there, and ourselves and Walsh Workstations. You can see what we're doing on www.ie if you want to find out more about that. But listen, thanks for listening. If there's any other inquiries down the line, lecturers can get in touch with us. We'll try and help out. But hopefully this has been useful for everybody. Okay, so thank you. Bye.
Good luck with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.